Mr. Kyari Ababuka, he's the Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of the Central Securities Clearing System. They are responsible for the settlement and clearing of investors' share certificates at the capital market. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thank you.
Now, okay, I would imagine that many people are familiar with the CSCS and what it does. I know it's independent from the NSE, but just quickly give us a brief background of what the CSCS is and what it does.
CSCS commenced operations about 15 years ago as the clearing and settlement agent of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. It is licensed and regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission in that role. CSCS is what is called a CSD, which is Central Securities Depository. So it's acting as an agent for Central Securities Depository, clearing and settlement of all transactions in the capital market. When you look at the role of CSCS, as you've stated so correctly, that it's an independent organ or financial market infrastructure apart from the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Central Securities Depositories globally are normally regulated by the Securities Exchange Commission, and we also do clearing and settlement of fixed income securities, which is the fixed income side of the market on an OTC or over-the-counter market. So, in essence, it's one of the critical infrastructure of the economy. By extension, since it is a major financial market infrastructure of the capital markets.
Do you think many people know that? Do you think the public know how important economically the CSCS is to the Nigerian economy?
I don't think so. I think coming in 6 months ago to this role of being the Managing Director of CSCS, I have heard a lot of remarks, and these are just anecdotal data that I have collected so far. Most people that I interact with, number one, think that it's a government agency, which it is not. Number two, feel when they hear clearing, some people even go as much as thinking whether it's a clearing and forwarding company. So there is a need for us as an organization to raise awareness of what we do and what our role is in the capital markets. Now, because it is a regulated industry, the shareholders, obviously it is a company that's owned by shareholders, most of which are, it includes the Nigerian Stock Exchange as a shareholder.
Plus, you're independent from the NSE, but the NSE is still a major
shareholder. They do own shares in the company, and banks own shares in the company, and stockbrokers and registrars own shares in the company. So since it's a critical infrastructure for all of these stakeholders, they also invested in the company. The major role is basically in trying to ensure that we do our role efficiently, and therefore technology becomes a centerpiece. It's a high-tech driven engine that we put in place, as well as bringing efficiency, transparency to the market. Because one of the things that has happened globally, if we, think back 4 or 5 years ago when the global financial meltdown happened, one of the things that most people do not realize is that the financial market infrastructures, these are the exchanges and the likes of CSDs like us, played a critical role in minimizing the impacts of the meltdown.
How so?
Well, one of the things is by actually increasing liquidity, by reducing, say, the transaction time and transaction and settlement time. From some markets used to have T+5 days, and they have brought it down to T+3, which we operate in Nigeria. By just doing that, they have increased the liquidity of the market by 40%. In some cases, the exchanges stepped in to put in circuit breakers, etc., etc. Those are all things that, at the core, had helped in reducing the negative impact that the market was undergoing 4 or 5 years ago. Now, the general consensus today is that CPSS IOSCO, which stands for the central the payment side, which is a combination and association of all the central banks, and IOSCO is the International Organization of Securities Commissions, are now reviewing all the rules and regulations that govern the financial markets. Now,
and that includes
our role, the CSDs as well. So in doing so, we want to correct some of the mistakes that had happened 4 or 5 years back, and at the same time try to bring in proper control mechanisms, risk management systems, etc., to the market.
You did talk about technology, and now a few years ago, perhaps let me say back as far back as 2006, 2007, when we had IPOs in the market, initial public offerings, we had the registrars, shareholders were very much, there was a lot of trepidation then when it came to the point where they had to collect their certificates. So of course the issue of dematerialization came into fore, and that was embarked upon, that took off. Now from then up until now, how has that been going, the dematerialization process?
The dematerialization, at the moment, we have approximately over 40% of all the shares
captured so far
are dematerialized. Now, which means that there is a greater number that's still out there in share certificate forms. And what we need to do as an industry stakeholders is to raise the awareness of people that it is safer to dematerialize your shares. But again, you've also mentioned something about the period when we had incessant or a high number of IPOs, and there were some kinds of abuses that had also taken place. And the role of an entity like CSCS is to actually bring in fairness, transparency and efficiency into the system. How do you do that? Rather than issue share certificates, and I may send you your share certificate or not, depending on whether I like your face or not, if you write out from the outset, do it in a digital form, meaning if I'm issuing 1 billion shares, all those 1 billion shares are credited to the customer's investors' accounts the day that the share is going to be listed. It means that everybody, all shareholders, can buy or sell the moment the issue hits the big board. Now, that brings in fairness, level playing field, and transparency to the system. And by so doing, it will increase the investor confidence in the market.
Now, the dematerialization, I know that took off from between 2009 and now. That's about 3 years now. And you just said that only about 40% have been converted into electronic form on your system. So that still leaves a huge amount out there. It's been 3 years now. How much has the CSC has been doing to ensure that? I imagine that many of the people who are still outside the system are those who've held onto their paper form shares for several years. Perhaps some of our very elderly people who are most probably not very computer literate, as it were. So what are you doing, and what's the process? What are you doing to ensure that these people are captured?
There is a meeting of minds, so to speak, of all stakeholders. This includes the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and the CSCS, to have a concerted effort in raising awareness of individuals that are still holding on to their share certificates to bring it and dematerialize their share certificates. The reason for doing so is that the fact that they come into a highly secure depository like CSCS gives peace of mind, 1. 2, it also allows the shareholder to sell a fraction of the share certificate amount. Let's say you have 10,000 shares of Bank A. Now, you cannot sell 1,000 shares if you're holding on to a certificate that says you have 10,000. But if it is dematerialized, you could sell 1,000 or 2,000 and still have the remaining amount. That's one. The other thing is that if you lose the share certificate, the headache of getting a replacement is so protracted and so cumbersome that it brings a lot of heartache to to people. Fires,
Theft.
burglary, whatever, could make them lose that paper form. However, if it is in a digital form, it's highly secure. And if there are any, if they want to sell a fraction of it, they would. In fact, the other beauty of having the share certificate in dematerialized form is that their dividends could also be credited directly to their bank accounts.
As the e-dividend
exactly,
payment.
the e-dividend payment. So those are all conveniences that we need to sell to the average investor so that we can increase the number from 40% to much higher. Because our ultimate goal is to have everybody come in and digitize their share certificate.
Is that part of your plans this year? I imagine you have, of course, an outlook for this year in going forward, what you plan to achieve this year in terms of your goals and objectives. Is that what percentage are you hoping to capture this year from that 40%?
It is part of our short to medium term plan. We're looking at the next 1 to 2 years where we would intensify. Yes, because the thing about human beings is that changing behavior takes time.
Mm-hmm.
You have to convince, you have to sell. Short of having a mandate, which is not nice, because you don't have to force them to do it, but you have to convince them that the value proposition is there. So we have to sell them that value proposition to say that you are better off with the share certificate in a digital form.
Well, I imagine that's the same message that they've been hearing, investors have been hearing in the last 3 years. So perhaps would the CSCS tell them differently, or is it you're going to take a different approach, saying the same thing but saying it in a different way, perhaps in a more persuasive?
Yeah, I don't think the message has been targeted at the right message has not been out there. The message has also not been targeted at the people that it's intended to do. I mean, people that are in the industry know about that. So it is like preaching to the choir, kind of. So it is internally, we all stakeholders, including journalists who are covering the market, know about these things. But talk to my auntie in the village or whatever, they wouldn't have any idea what you're talking about. So we need to raise that noise level, if you will, to convince the average person to come in.
And the fact that there's just one CSCS. Now, what if we, for some reason, had a raft of IPOs going through the roof? We had a surge in share certificates having to be issued to investors and all of that. Is a CSCS, it's just one of you. Should there be just one of you, and would you be able to handle that if we had, if the market was, where it ought to be, raft of IPs and all of that?
Right. The key operative word is central. Okay. Central Securities Depository or Central Securities and Clearing System means that you are the only entity that is licensed to regulate. And in that sense, if there is a huge volume of IPOs or even transaction volumes, and of course the dematerialization means that we will have larger volume that would be available for transactions. The core of our engine is technology driven. We have hardware and software that we actually have in place that can cater for volumes that are going to be running in the multiples of maybe hundreds or thousands of what we're doing currently, meaning that right now the capacity utilization of our system is so infinitesimally small that we can cope with a much larger volume of transactions. So that's one. The other thing is that being the party that is at the junction of buying and selling, if you have more than one, there would be all kinds of confusion because you now have settlement banks that are. So the network effect will make it extremely inefficient if you have more than one CSD. I'll give you an example. There are jurisdictions like Russia where they have 2 CSDs. They just got those 2 merged because of the inefficiencies it was presenting. Because Russia has now opened up to the rest of the world about 10, 15 years ago. And since then they have been grappling with having 2 CSDs. And the original intention of the formation of the CSDs in Russia was that one was supposed to be handling financial instruments like fixed income, the other was supposed to handle equities. Before you know it, the competitive spirit makes each one encroach on the other's turf. Same in Ghana. There were 2 but now they've merged into one, etc., etc. So in most jurisdictions, what you find is that in the general big boards, you have only one central securities depository.
So it's all about having, sorry to butt in, it's all about having adequate technology just so you don't have to
cope
more than
with
one.
it. Yes, you must have technology as well as risk management and internal control mechanisms, and it also has to open up so that the regulators can see what you're doing. Your other stakeholders like the custodian banks, settlement banks, and some of your other participants also have a clear line of sight to your business.
Okay, now one of the reasons why the dematerialization process came to board was the fact that many of the market infractions then recorded that had to do with share certificates missing, stolen, all kinds of stories. Now that many of them, have been converted to e-form, what kind of challenges do you still have? Do people still complain about missing certificates?
What we have now discovered is that obviously wherever there is money, as in my previous area of work, which is in the payment space, wherever there is money, you'd also find bad people around, hanging around to see if they can put their paws or dip their paws into that pot. In our case, when you have dematerialized, the challenges now are about how can you safeguard the assets given to you securely. So one would be technology itself has risks that come along with it. Knock on wood, so far we don't have any technological breaches or technology failure per se that would undermine the values of assets that people have put in custody to us. The other element of risk is fraud related to people, for lack of a better word, identity theft. Someone, I would claim that I'm Esther, right, and go to some other stockbroker, not yours, and then say, oh, I decided to move my account from Esther's real stockbroker to my new Esther, transferring. Now, we have put mechanisms in place to address those issues. Previously, it was all done manually by filling out forms, signing, looking at signature for verification, and so on and so forth. What we have done quite recently is to actually make it electronic, the entire transaction from start to end. And that way, the stockbroker initiating the transfer would be given security tokens, what is called a secure ID, and the other stockbroker, that is the resident stockbroker, also has their secure token, and it is only the bona fide employees of that stock brokerage house that could go in and initiate the transaction. And even then, if we discover, or if we have our system throws up things that are not clearly done within those two other parties. So we're basically standing in the middle, mainly concerned with the integrity of that transaction. And as long as the transaction is secure with full integrity, we let it go. If not, we hold it and do some other verifications before the transfer is effected. So that is a weak link that we've actually identified, and we have preferred technology as a solution to reduce, if not eliminate, fraud in connection with that.
So, okay, are we talking about are there passwords involved, personal identification numbers? If I have my e-certificate or my account, am I entitled to a password, a personal identification number, or something?
That would be left to some investors. There are some investors that would prefer to have, even though they have a broker A who is managing their accounts, they would say, look, I don't trust my broker per se. I mean, I want a special account. And in which case, they are going to deal directly with CSCS, and they will open a special account, and they have their portfolio in their special account. And for those customers, they have direct access to their account. They can actually check their balance every hour if they feel that they need to check on their account hourly or daily. And when they want to sell or buy, they can then take the amount that they want transferred to the broker, the same broker, and then request the broker to sell. That way, if they have, 10 million naira in their account, they can move say, ₦1 million worth of shares to the broker, then the broker will sell and give it to them. So this is what we call special accounts. In fact, we are encouraging some of the customers that feel that, with the current climate, that they would rather be in control of their accounts, to reach out to us so that we can help them set them up with those special accounts. Now, that requires them to have technology, systems, how they would access that account and so on and so forth, so securely. So we'll deal with the customer directly in giving them those tokens and so on and so forth.
You just mentioned computers, technology, especially the computers issue. We still, many of these people are still not computer literate. How many people? Because I imagine that would lock out a certain group of people, and it could be a huge amount.
Right.
How are those people? How can they cope, or what provision has been made for those people?
One of the things we're looking at, which is down the road, possibly towards the end of the year or early next year, is to actually also enable people to interact with the market via their mobile phones.
Look at the way the banks do.
Right, the way the banks do. Now, the interesting thing is that even interfacing with the computer, whether you're using mobile or some other device, the core of the system is still computer. It is the user interface. If it is friendly enough, a person who is semi-literate could still interact with it. That's why it is easier for even an illiterate person to withdraw money from an ATM. All you need is 4-digit or 6-digit or whatever the PIN is, and it's known to you, and you can interact. But at the core, everything from that ATM down to the bank's core banking system is all computer driven. So in that regard, it is not exclusionary. We try and make it as user-friendly as possible, as a friend of mine would say, as idiot-proof as possible.
Okay.
And that way, even if you have the lowest level of education, which I believe in Nigeria, at least the first 4 or 5 years of primary education is common. So what we believe could happen is that we empower the investor so that they become part and parcel of the fraud monitoring system, if you will, of the ecosystem.
For those who have been burnt in the past, who've had horrible experiences with their share certificates, how much confidence should they have now in the CSCS?
I think the proof is in the pudding. What we have put in place and continue to put in place is to raise the investor confidence. I think one of the things that need to happen is for us to have a new IPO where shares are listed and everything is done electronically. People will have that confidence. The other thing I can also say about the e-dividend is that in the case of any customer that has provided us through their stockbrokers their bank account details and have signed off with their registrar and so on and so forth so that they get their e-dividends, we would like to hear from them about any issues they may encounter when a corporate action like an AGM, a dividend payment is made, because what I can assure people is that with e-dividend we can actually directly credit the customer's account when at the appropriate moment without any issues. Now those are little steps that would help raise the investor confidence generally.
Okay, let's double a little bit into your finances. I know the CSCS is independent from the NSE, even though you share the same building.
Yes.
But I also do know that a lot of the money you would make would come from, if there are IPOs on a regular basis. Investors would have to come to the CSCS and register the shares and all of that.
Right.
But while that hasn't been, there's been a dearth of that. So how has the CSCS been coping in terms of, money coming into business, basically?
Right. I think the business model is something that I can share with you. Obviously, the downturn of the market has affected CSCS and indeed the NSE negatively. With CSCS, the effect is far-reaching. Let me put it that way. The effect is far-reaching. Second, the reason why I have come in to CSCS is to actually transform the organization. Now, there are some key things that I believe need to be in place.
Mr. Kyari, sorry to butt in. Hold your thoughts for us. We do have a call from the Nigerian Stock Exchange. David Andorin, a stockbroker, is calling live from the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Good morning, David. David, if you can hear me, good morning.
Good morning, Esther.
Good morning, David. I can hear you. What's okay. I know the market has started trading. What are the numbers looking like right now?
Okay, Esther, the market is fully opened, and the all-share index is down by 0.25%. I'd like to quickly run through the various sectors of the market. Food and beverages down by 0.94%. MSC 30 down by 0.34%. Oil and gas unchanged. Insurance down heavily by 1.24%, while the banking sector is slightly down by 0.02%.
David, what's responsible for this bearish trend right now? Why are the numbers so far into the negative territory?
Yeah, I think perhaps some element of profit taking may actually be occurring right now, considering the fact that yesterday the market was upbeat. I think sometime last week too, the market was upbeat, and so people are actually taking some profit now. But I'd like to draw your attention to what is happening in Nestle. Nestle is still seriously upbeat. In fact, very heavy transactions are occurring in that security right now, which is driving the value of transactions to over 1 billion naira so soon in trading. But other than that, I think we have some profit taking already occurring in the market.
Okay, so I take it that the broad index has slipped back into 20,000 point mark, the 20,000 point mark from 21,000 points.
No, Esther, the all-share index is still at 21,000 points, which actually is higher than the point at which the market opened for the year. Okay. So there are positive developments, and they are not unexpected at this time because investors are taking serious positions in readiness for the release of the audited full-year report, especially for the bank.
Okay, David, looking at the numbers now, well, most of them in the red, are we heading towards a bearish close today? Does it look like that?
We cannot decide yet because even on the floor of the stock exchange right now, very few traders are actually around. And so later in the day when the market is fully mobilized, then the direction will become discernible.
Okay, David, thank you so much. That's about all we can take from you right now. Thank you so much for your contribution. We really do appreciate it. Been talking to David Andorin, stockbroker, calling live from the trading floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and according to him, many of the numbers are in the red. Profit taking, he says, although many investors are still positioning themselves for the full-year financial results of many of the quoted companies on the exchange. Now, according to him, the all-share index is currently down about 0.25%. The NSE 30, that's tracking the performance of blue chips, currently down also by 0.34%. Insurance subsector down heavily by over 1%. We could be looking at a negative close at the end of today's trading. While still talking to Mr. Kyari Ababuka, the CEO of the Central Securities Clearance System. Thank you so much, sir, for sticking around. We're almost completely out of time. Now, let's just give one last a question. Now, going forward, what should the shareholders especially be expecting in terms of services, in terms of that for the year going forward, 2012?
Yes. One of the things that we as an organization are responding to the market is to actually look at our systems, our processes, our strategy. So in the short to medium term, major structural realignment has to take place. Our value system, which actually is acronym SECURE, which stands for security, efficiency, confidentiality, uprightness, resourcefulness, and excellence, would ensure that the assets entrusted to us is held as securely as possible with full confidentiality, and we bring in innovative inventiveness to bear to the market, such that the average investor will feel highly secure and entrust us with their portfolio, and be rest assured that they can actually sleep at night.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, you heard it from him. Your e-certificates, for those of you who have converted the paper form of your share certificates into e-form, they're very much safe, and the CSCS is doing all it can to ensure that they remain safe, and of course embarking on some other measures to ensure that in terms of service delivery, you're going to get the very best. But that's about all we can take on today's edition of Business Morning. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Channel's news track is at the top of the hour. I'm Esther Budaga. Bye for now.